Penguin Random House Audio presents Eagle and Crane by Suzanne Rindell. Read for you by Elizabeth Romanski. In memory of my grandfather, Norbert. Chapter 1. Newcastle, California, September 16th, 1943. They bump along the country road, rolling through golden hills that are punctuated with granite boulders and dotted with clusters of oak trees that appear blackish-green from afar. Every so often, the road dips through a marshy patch here, a thicket of wild blackberry bushes there. Broken branches and nibbled leaves, the signs of beaver and deer. Verdant meadows and white flashes of cabbage-worm moths. As they near the orchard, clouds of sparrows and finches make nervous, disorganized dives at the soft yellow weeds around the plum trees, little groups of them assembling like constellations and abruptly breaking up again, each and every tiny nervous body keeping one eye turned to the sky for the shadowy shape of a hawk soaring high above. When they reach the break in the low split-rail fence, the sheriff steers the car onto the property and along the dirt drive, through the many rows of trees, and toward the leaning peak of the largest foothill. The morning air is laced with the sharp, peppery scent of dry grass burning. "Awful smoky out," Agent Bonner remarks, once the automobile comes to a stop. "Rice fields," the deputy says, as the three men step out of the sheriff's old Model A. "Somewhere down in the valley. It's after harvest, see? This is when they burn 'em. Smoke gets trapped up here, against the foothills. Kinda sets around a spell." The sky is indeed filled with a thick haze, turning at the color of dull gunmetal. The sun is a flat white disk, small as a dime and lost in a sea of gray. "It's routine farming business. The rice fields aren't Jap-owned," Deputy Henderson continues. "Or if they were, they aren't anymore." He is young, the right age for a soldier, but there is an air of being excluded about him and of lingering teenage angst. Probably flat-footed, or poor eyesight, Bonner thinks. Those are the most common 4Fs, when you can't tell by simply looking at a man. Henderson's hair is the color of tarnished brass. His face and neck are very pink, the flesh cratered, ropey, and swollen with acne. Just to look at him, a man could feel the sting of what it must feel like to shave. "Let's get this over with," Sheriff Whitcomb says. At least it is obvious why he isn't marching around in a uniform on the front. Too old. He is thin, with haunted blue eyes, a pair of jowls, and one tuft of white hair sprouting from an otherwise shiny dome. Bonner spied the tuft back at the station before the sheriff reached for his hat and offered to drive the group out to the ranch. Every town seems to have a pair like this, Bonner thinks. Henderson and Whitcomb. One will eventually replace the other, and the cycle will begin again. "You said Lewis Thorn is living in the old farmhouse now?" The sheriff calls over his shoulder, speaking to Henderson. He is polite enough to Agent Bonner, but it is clear he prefers to pretend the agent is invisible. "Yes," Deputy Henderson answers the sheriff in a quick, eager voice. "Old man Yamada signed it over to him before they lost legal rights, so Lewis owns it fair and square." "That's mighty interesting," Agent Bonner remarks. Bonner certainly heard of cases where Japanese families had signed over their property to their white neighbors before being evacuated to the camps. In every single case, the Japanese were hoping to eventually have their land, homes, and cars returned to them, which implied a kind of special trust in one's neighbors. "It ain't how you think. The whole town was mighty shocked the Yamadas did that," Henderson says. "The Thorns and the Yamadas had a long-standing dispute over this land." "Why'd he sign it over to the Thorn family, then, if there was bad blood?" Bonner asks. He looks to Whitcomb, but Whitcomb shrugs and looks away, his gaze dilating with disinterest. Bonner can tell the sheriff finds explaining town gossip to an outsider tedious. "Lewis Thorn and Harry Yamada was friends, sort of," Whitcomb says dispassionately. "Maybe old man Yamada put some stock in that. The old man didn't have any friends who weren't Japanese himself. Maybe he figured it was worth a shot." "Took a fat chance on that," Deputy Henderson grunts, reaching one hand up to rub at his pimply face. I say Lewis ain't giving this land back. His father and grandfather always told him this land was Thorn property in the first place. They'd likely roll over in their graves if he was to think about giving it back. All right, Whitcomb says, pulling out his revolver, spinning the cylinder to ensure all 6 rounds are there, and putting it back in his holster. Let's just see if he knows anything. Keep it civilized. Should be pretty straightforward. We're talking about a law-abiding citizen here. I don't have any reason to believe Lewis Thorn would lie to us. They begin walking up the incline of the foothill toward the tidy white clapboard house nestled into the hillside just below the top. Lewis Thorn might be living in it now, but old man Yamada had originally built it half a century ago, back when the latter was still a baby-faced young man, an early settler to the area. The house sits into the hill in a slightly cantilevered fashion, with a small wraparound porch from which a person can look out over the orchards below. Neat rows of plum trees extend below one side of the house, a grove of satsumas in the middle, and almond trees on the other. The property consists of some 50-odd acres, and as the 3 men climb the foothill now, they can see that the trees eventually peter out to reveal a wide, flat pasture some distance away. As they pause to look, 3 sets of eyes fall upon the far-off shape of a small, impromptu hangar down below, looking as though it had been thrown together hastily from available materials. It is the place where the Yamadas kept their biplane, and where Lewis Thorn purportedly still keeps it now, or so Agent Bonner has been informed. The FBI took special note of the biplane after the 2 remaining members of the Yamada clan, Kenichi and Haruto, Harry Yamada, broke out of the Tule Lake Relocation Center, where they were being detained. The plane made the FBI more nervous than usual, but either way, the Yamadas were to be tracked down and returned to the segregation center, and as soon as possible. The 3 men arrive in front of the house and climb up the 20 or so stairs that lead up to the porch. No need to knock. Their boots make a good deal of noise on the wooden planks. The screen door swings open on creaking hinges before the 3rd man reaches the top stair. May I help you, fellas? The door claps shut. Lewis Thorn, dressed in a long-sleeved undershirt and trousers, his suspenders hanging beside his hips, looks at the men standing on his porch, glancing searchingly from one to the next. One half of his face is dewy, clean-shaven. The other half is covered in lather. He is still clutching the straight razor in his left hand. At the sight of the razor, Whitcomb lightly touches a hand to the butt of the gun on his own hip. Morning, Lewis. The way I hear it, you got the run of things here these days, the sheriff says, taking the lead. That's right, Lewis responds. There is a note of caution in his voice. He looks over the sheriff's shoulder, taking in the unfamiliar sight of Agent Bonner. For a brief instant, Lewis appears startled to see the FBI agent, but quickly recovers himself. Looks like you settled into the place pretty good, the sheriff presses on. Lewis returns his gaze to the sheriff, but doesn't reply. I take it you heard about them Yamada boys already. I heard, Lewis says. His voice is low, steady. Then you know we're here to ask you if you seen 'em. Lewis blinks. Harry and Mr. Yamada? Yes. I reckon this is the last place they'd come. So you're telling me you ain't seen them? The sheriff prods. No. And you wouldn't be inclined to help those Yamada boys if they came knocking? I told you, I haven't seen them since. All right, the sheriff relents. You understand? We gotta ask, Lewis. Agent Bonner here can't go about his business till them boys have been found. Mr. Thorn. Agent Bonner introduces himself, clearing his throat and extending his hand. Lewis hesitates, then passes the straight razor to his other hand. The handshake is curt. Look here, Lewis, the sheriff continues. I don't know what you got going on in that head of yours. Maybe you.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?